Okay, so in this video we are going to be setting the clearance on the differential. Now I've had quite a few problems with this, so I thought it was worth doing a video to share what I have found. So the first thing I'm going to do is zoom in so you can have a look at what I'm talking about. So the first thing I need to point out is that the whole differential has been pushed right to this end. What you want to happen is when you screw the cover back down, this section here will push against the bearing and push the whole differential back in. You don't want any clearance on this end. The clearance is on the other end where you put the shims. So before I put that cover back on, you obviously want to make sure you've got the spring, the ball bearing and the O-ring on. I'm also using a new gasket, and that gasket's going to have Hylamar on as well. So the first job is to put this end cover back on. Okay, so that is the cover bolted on and torqued up. You only need 6 foot-pounds on these fasteners. If you go too much, you will find you'll strip the thread, and the one that strips the easiest is that one there, as I found out. Anyway, because I've used sealant on the gasket as well, I'm going to give that half an hour and then re-torque them all, just in case the sealant has squidged out the gap. So now we get on to the awkward bit. What the Haynes manual says is to put the end cover on without any gasket or shims in place. Now I'm not going to bolt it up. I think it's better just to use your hand pressure. Then you should be able to measure a gap down there. So I'm telling you, for my gearbox, there is no gap. Now it does actually cover that in the Haynes manual, and it just says put a very thick shim in. Now the problem is I don't actually know the gap that exists between that bit and the bearing. So for me, the only thing I could do was to put some of the shims back until I get a gap, and then I can work it out. So the question is, what gap do you need? And there's not just one answer to that. There are a few variables for this. The first one is the gasket you use. This is the gasket that came with the kit, and it's quite thick. In fact, this is 0.4 of a millimetre. This is another one I've cut out, and this is 0.3. And I've actually decided to go with another one out of this gasket material, which is 1/4 of a millimetre. This all has an effect on the gap. Now at this point, I'm actually going to explain there are two different types of bearings that you could have. This one is a standard ball bearing, or deep groove ball bearing. This only has a small clearance. This is 1 or 2 thousandths of an inch. There is, however, a different type of bearing, which I've got here, which is one of the ones I took off, and it says the word thrust there. This is a different type of bearing, and this bearing actually needs 4 thousandths of an inch. So you need to adjust your shims for the type of bearing that you have. So because I have this type of bearing, what I want to achieve is the outer case, or this bit in particular, needs to be pushing down on that part, the outer race of the bearing. And I want a force equivalent to 2 thousandths of an inch pushing that in. And that will get rid of any clearance that is in both bearings. So the next part of this for me is to measure the actual clearance I've got, and as explained, I'm going to have to put the shims back. Okay, so I've put some shims under there, and all I'm going to do is put hand pressure. I'm pushing quite hard onto the diff, and I now need to measure the clearance. So that 5 goes, 6 goes, should check in a couple of places. This is 8. Now 8 will just about go. However, I need that gap to be 12 thousandths of an inch. So I just need to add another shim and see if I can get that to 12. I happen to have a 3 thousandths, so let's try that. So this should be very nearly 12, yes, and 12 fits very nicely in there. And what you're hoping to find even if you put quite a lot of force on this cover, you can still get that 12 in there. So that would appear to be correct for my preload. So what that now means, with those shims in place, when I put the gasket, which is 10 thousandths, on the cover, I will be forcing that outer race in by 2 thousandths of an inch. Okay, so I'm happy with what I've done here. I think the number of shims I've got will be absolutely perfect for the exact amount of preload on the bearing. But just in case you don't fully understand what we're trying to achieve, if you don't have any force on that race, then potentially the whole differential is free to move just slightly forward and backwards. And also, the bearing, if it gets some dirt in, could actually spin in the casing, which you don't want to happen. If you do it the other way and put too much force onto that bearing, then you'll probably find the casing, or this outer casing, will distort and you'll end up with potential oil leaks down the side. So you really want the perfect preload on that bearing, which, as I've explained, in my case is between 1 and 2 thousandths of an inch. So I hope that video has been of some use to you. It took me quite a long time to get my head around what we are trying to achieve. Anyway, I'm pleased that is now done. I'll get that cover bolted up and that will be the gearbox complete. Anyway, thank you for watching and please subscribe for some more mini videos.